said something about he thinks he might be suffering from autism. He says he might have autism. And I
Mm.
wanted to hit on that because, and matter of fact, let me go ahead and put them up. So I got It Is What It Is podcast on the screen so you can see it. Um, so everybody knows where I'm coming from. I am a 10 plus year special education, behavioral health, mental health, BHT, MHT, TA in private and public uh, psychiatric facilities and institutions. So that's where my background comes from. But Justin, I wanted you to get the definition about autism so I can kind of clear up and give my boys that It Is What It Is some shine and tell them thank you.
I don't got the I got the facts, and I can pull up the definition too. Hold on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, pull up the definition. Autism
So
definition.
Mace was telling a story, or Cameron was telling a story of a basketball player that's trying to join the NBA so he can get his 10th year in the NBA so he can get health insurance for his two autistic children. And Cameron was explaining that one of his friend's children was suffering from Asperger's and like to be alone and isolative. And they said that that might be a sign or a symptom of autism. And what I
Mm,
wanted to tell them and what I wanted to tell the world or what I want to tell people is autism is on a spectrum. It's a scale. It's a sliding scale. You can be
correct.
high functioning autism and you can be low function autism. Low
Correct.
functioning would be nonverbal, um, incontinence, and might be, um, you might, like you said, never talk. You would talk, you communicate, but you might never talk like we're talking right now. Um,
Right.
you can probably learn to use the bathroom, but you might always wear depends or diapers. It could be that way all the way to adulthood. High function autism might be your coworker next to you at work. You just don't realize that they're autistic to a certain scale. So, what you
Mhm.
got for me, Justin?
Yeah. So, well, let's start the definition first. It's a neuro condition of variable, like with a variety of lifelong effects that could be recognized in early childhood or later in adulthood. Difficulties with social interactions, communication, and restrictive or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. So,
Okay, with
I guess
that,
people that just overthink things and the kind of really, really, really deep dive, they deep super focus on something. Is
yeah,
that a correct way of?
that is potentially uh one type or one part of autism. So the reason I kind of brought this up is because first off, shout out to It Is What It Is podcast, Mason Cameron and Stat Baby. They did a great job of
It's
talking
amazing
about
show.
it and bringing it up to the world. And I think honestly, the reason I'm talking at Mace right now is because Mace has said multiple times on the show that he is a licensed therapist, or not a licensed therapist, but he's taking the classes to actually offer therapy and counseling to people. And I think this is one of those subject matters or topic matters that he could really get behind and actually make a big difference in it because people respect Mason. He has a big voice. Um, the thing I wanted to say about autism is the scale. So because you have a low function and a high function, right? A lot of the states, a lot of the systems don't offer the people that need the help the most the funding to deal with autism because it's a sliding scale. Okay, you get labeled as autism. Do you get funding? Not necessarily. You have to go through a rigorous amount of testing, therapy, counsel sessions, observations, IEP meetings, and different stuff as a child. Now, this is a child, possibly all the way up until adulthood, not IEP meetings, but to get funding and actually retain that funding. So this basketball player that wants the health benefits for his children because he has two boys that are autistic, this makes a lot of sense because the state and probably where he's at the area, they're not going to back him. They're not going to give him this funding that he needs to take care of his sons. And this is like for a lot of people deal with this with autistic children. You have multiple children that are autistic. You need them to go to a different school. They can't just go to public school. They can't just they might need a little bit more attention. A lot of that stuff has to come out of these parents' pockets. But we'll send a drug addict to rehab multiple times for free on the state's back, but we won't send the children who need the help to the right institution so they can
It's
receive the
heavy.
help. And it's a lot easier to help an autistic child than it is a drug addict. Trust me, I know that's a fact. Um, and what I'll say to that is, I really just wanted to highlight Mace, Cam, and Stat again. It is what it is podcast for bringing up this subject, and I don't think they wanted to hit it this hard, but I wanted to shout them out, and I thought it really like hit home. But I think there should be more education on the sliding scale. And what I was going to say, because it's such a sliding scale, a lot of the states don't fund it when you get labeled as autistic. And
Right.
a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, autistic used to be special needs. Special needs had more funding than autism does."
Mm.
So you need to look into that statewide, state to state basis. But when I was in Arizona, that's where I did most of my work. And then when I was in South Carolina, up in Greenville, where I did a lot of my work, you just don't get support. You don't get the funding for it.
Right, right. According to this source this article from 2020, November 4th, it says 1 in 68 children in the United States suffer from some type of autism.
Because it's a sliding
Um,
scale.
right, it is about 4 times more likely that boys would get autism than girls.
Hmm.
Interesting. Affects children of all racial, ethnic, and social economic groups. Is a spectrum disorder, which means that every child with autism has different skills, challenges, and needs. Let me see. What else is another fact? Let's see. What's something juicy here?
I'll let you get to it.
Can be reliably diagnosed by the age of 2.
Right.
So there are very clear standards and structures for this.
Right.
It
So
seems like
here's the thing I want people to
there's no cure
realize.
for it
No, there's no
as of
cure.
now.
Here's the thing I want people also to know about autism. What affects autism? So, like for instance, you mentioned symmetrical pattern. Like so, for instance, a lot of times, not all, it's not always a standard, but a lot of times, mid to low level functioning autism people do not do well without a pattern. But we all know life isn't a pattern. Like you don't do the same thing every day. Every day something is different, regardless if it's on a high scale or a low scale. You do something different every day. But what people don't realize is that certain things that affect autism that can trigger like what we would call a manic episode or like a behavioral outburst. You could have an autistic child that you have had nothing but cotton on, and all of a sudden one day you get him a silk shirt, and you wonder why he's bugging out. It's because the fabric is different. You could take an autistic child that's been in yellow sunlight, like yellow lighting in your house, and get fluorescent light, and the buzzing from the fluorescent light can actually cause them to have a manic episode. You could feed them something. It could be diet. It can be social. High functioning autism usually, or well, I should say, I've had a case where a student of mine was high functioning, and what his problem was social. He couldn't be around more than like probably like 30 people at a time. So like when he was out in the cafeteria and all the kids were there, that was a struggle for him. But that's why he was at the school. Not anything else. It just was the social aspect.